Namaste everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is a unique podcast. I'm recording in Abhijit's house and Abhijit is outside his house. So this is weird. Okay. So the BJP on December 5th had done a long thread about this OCCRP. It was all about a French investigative journalist that had revealed that the US government controls the media organization OCCRP, dictating multiple stories that it ran and was influenced, and whatever they were saying, it did not have backing and stuff like that. And that has led to a discussion about what the deep state is, what the deep state does. Now, there has been so much back and forth about what is the deep state conceptually. So I just wanted to sit down and talk with Abhijit, and we're going to keep it short and crisp. We'll wrap up in an hour. I don't want it to be meandering. So, first of all, fundamental question: is there something like a deep state, Abhijit?
There is something called a deep state. It is not precisely applicable here, and I'll tell you why. Uh, Basically, what it is that a deep state is what you have in uh, Pakistan or in Egypt, where the military controls everything, and they can just remove people at will. Thailand, for example, another classic deep state, right? The coterie around the king, which will just remove you, and the military kind of, no matter what. Sure, the military is extremely powerful out there, but if the king says anything, they do yes sir, because their power derives from the king, right? And there's a coterie of old nobles around the king. That's a deep state. In America, it's slightly different. We need to understand this, that when things moved from manufacturing to services became something of a cabal. Okay, so everything is the further expansion of services. So you look at the subprime mortgage crisis that happened under George Bush, whose roots were under Bill Clinton, who said you no longer needed to do a proper bank assessment before giving credit limits. You just needed a letter from anyone saying, uh, yes, a veterinarian can earn $10 million a year, even though this guy would be earning no more than, say, $200,000 a year, and he'd get loans based on that, which is what led to your subprime mortgage crisis. They're constantly looking to expand services and services footprints, which is why you have things like DEI, all kinds of compliances, environmental compliance, this compliance, that compliance, because it's constantly job seeking, constantly seeking to create markets for itself. And it has to be an enforcement, because services, maybe real services that people require, are very few. You need banking, you need say home delivery and things like that. You don't need environmental consultants, you don't need DEI and shit like that, right? So it's a sort of self-perpetuating mafia, which also then wants information control. What is the point of information control? That people will be trained in information control, and they will censor, they will tell you what is to be censored, what is not to be censored. Because there's nothing more jobless than a bloody fact checker, right? Because technically fact checking can be done by a very small thing. Most of fact checking is 99% of fact checking is just bullshit. It's just commentariat passing off as fact checking. Okay.
Just as Nirmalya calls it, strawman fact checking.
Strawman fact checking. So what ends up happening is that you have this whole uh, alignment of interests, because you have people who are normally unemployable who keep expanding the market. Now, remember, technically, if you offset America's national debt with its GDP, America is poorer than India. That's not the way it works, obviously, right? But America's national debt is more than its GDP. Technically, the American is worth less. You look at GDP figures from just 15, 20 years back, the GDP of America was less than half of what it is today. So the entire expansion now, boss, you're talking, if it was half of what it is, 16 to 32 trillion dollars. Based on services, you've added $16 trillion. That is enough to change governments for. It is enough to do regime change. It is enough to do coups. This is serious money with very serious people whose wealth, livelihoods depend on it. That is what the deep state is. They're constantly trying to inflate basically inflate services, not manufacturing services.
Okay, a follow up question. You've actually raised a very good point, and in fact, this is the one point that I had thought of that can blow a hole into my argument. So my whole see, you know that I lean libertarian. I have always believed that people overestimate the ability and capacity of the state itself. So
Yes.
even if the deep state exists at a theoretical level, the execution and the ability of execution of a deep state is so bad because the pushes and pulls of people, different groups. So
Yeah.
so you started off very well where you said the real deep state is Pakistan, where everything is centralized and controlled by the armed forces.
And
Like
there
in
is no
America,
divergence of interests.
yeah, but in a country like America, let's say, I mean, you've said this multiple times, even on the Sham Sharma show, that while the State Department might want one thing, the Defense Department might want another thing. So the same country is going pro-India and anti-India simultaneously, and for differing reasons. Now, does this argument that the libertarian argument that the deep state, and you know what the funny thing is, Abhijit, in America many proponents of the deep state idea are actually libertarians, which I find so. If you think the state is fundamentally weak, how can a deep state exist?
So it's not weak. That's the point. It's not weak at all. When you've added $16 trillion, you're very, very powerful. Now you look at DEI. Now let's look at how DEI created contradictions within the Democrat Party itself that led to its loss this time around. Okay. DEI had a lot of promise of adding lots of things. Okay. You can get rid of old established families, old established family businesses, create new niches for people coming into those WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant hegemonies, Jewish hegemonies in the banking, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant hegemonies in services and manufacturing. You can They've added so much in terms of the valuation of universities. They've added so much in terms of because you can sell a bloody DEI degree for the same $40,000 at Harvard when it'll cost you just $1,000, as opposed to a physics degree which will actually cost you about $70,000-80,000 actually. Harvard won't make too much of a profit or no profit at all on science degrees technically, right? Uh, so they've added a lot to the economy technically. Okay. The problem is when it starts terrorizing the other established uh, uh, services as well, or entrenched voters who are in manufacturing, like the Rust Belt and things like that in America, it creates contradictions which play out by themselves. How is it that Joe Biden gets 81 million votes and Kamala gets 10 million votes less? Well, not 10, but very significant, 7 million votes less, right? Against the same guy. What was it that led to Kamala being elevated without even going through primaries and shit like that? Why did they shield it for so long? Right. So all of these were things, and they wanted the DEI hierarchy, bureaucracy overreached. They overreached, they overplayed their hand. And that is why you now find that everybody, and look at BlackRock, for example. BlackRock promotes DEI very assiduously. And they've created a whole, possibly $1 trillion industry out of it. Everyone has to do compliances. You have to hire trainers and shit like that. These were jobs that didn't exist. Of course, they're useless jobs that should not exist. And then there is this belief, so let's take two. I've always believed there's only one school of economics, the Austrian school of economics, because the only one that subjects itself to accountability. If it does not work, they discard the idea. Okay. Take a quack like Thomas Piketty. Now, nobody seems to know this, but Thomas Piketty is actually a wife basher. He's a wife abuser who used to viciously abuse his wife. She filed cases against him. They settled out of court. And then he went around slandering her, calling her
Is Abhijit frozen?
can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah, now you're not. Okay.
So he was forced to pay a huge amount to that ex partner of his. But because he's leftist, he's celebrated. Nobody talks about his history of wife bashing and shit like that. What is his great idea? That there is too much anxiety amongst the in the current economy, and the state needs to deal with it. When is your mental problem the responsibility of the state? If you have anxiety, you bloody sort it out. Providing you with holidays and shit like that and job security is not. Look, the job of the government goes back to Chanakya. You remember we've had this conversation. Both communism and the Austrian School of Economics were actually invented in India. Chanakya invented the Austrian School of Economics, and Ashoka invented communism. So you go back to Chanakyan principles. What do you need to provide? I would actually stretch the Austrian School of Economics a bit. Education, healthcare, equality of opportunity. That's it. Defense, security, policing, the monopoly of violence of the state. But if you want better infrastructure, create the private companies to build that infrastructure and pay for that infrastructure that is built. You need to have regulatory mechanisms in place so that nobody takes a monopoly and starts extorting and shit like that. But that is for a functional marketplace, because a monopoly distorts the marketplace. This is the only function of government. And yet the ability of communists and socialists to constantly reinvent themselves and come up with new jargon for their bullshit and saying the same old bullshit idea in a new bottle is incredible. And that's exactly what they're doing. Let's be clear about it. Piketty is not saying anything new. He's just packaged it in a new bottle with new words.
So then, maybe I'll take this question from a viewer and I'll twist it a little bit and add my bit to it. So somebody has said, I thought CIA was the deep state. Now, what exactly is the deep state? Is it intelligence agencies? Is it national security just overall? Is it like DEI is a new idea, right? But let's say 20 years ago, then what was the nature of the deep state then?
Exactly. So CIA has never really been the deep state. We need to get this very clear. The CIA's effectiveness in government, or the FBI's effectiveness in government, is vastly overstated. Most of what has been done with the CIA and the FBI is that they've been victims of the same bureaucratic overreach. They've expanded their bureaucracy so much to the point where they've become irrelevant. Today, the CIA cannot carry out the kind of operation Israeli intelligence carried out. They just can't.
नहीं, इसको explain कर. I find it very hard to believe, so please explain this.
The operation that Israel carried out, for example,
the pager one you're talking about.
Pager one, the pager explosions. You remember I told you it would have taken 7 years in the planning. Finally, I've tweeted out that thing. It was 10 years in the planning. 10 years it was shepherded through, the seeds were laid, it came to fruition and things like that, because it's a small, compact organization that operates in a... People don't realize how, meeting a prime minister in Israel is no big deal. Any Israeli citizen can go meet their prime minister. And the security for Netanyahu is when he goes out. In Israel, he'll walk into a room full of young cadets with loaded guns, and there's no security checking because there's that societal trust that nobody will turn their gun on the prime minister. Okay? So it's a very different small setup where security in and out is controlled by a very powerful civilian. This thing. The problem in America is political control has now gone to the bureaucrats, because you've expanded the bureaucracy so much. They produce so much idiotic papers which legislators don't even read through. It is not legislators producing policy, it's bureaucrats producing policy. Okay. Now, the contradictions between the FBI, CIA, the Defense Department, defense manufacturers, and things is very, very different. They have huge contradictions amongst themselves. Sometimes it all comes together because when you have a bureaucracy that wants to, you know, uh, that perceives a common threat, like they did with Trump, much more so now because that Doge department has promised to lay off most of the FBI. Imagine the FBI has 7,000 people in their in the JF Edgar Hoover building in DC doing diddly squat. They're not investigating cases, they're just typing up reports here and there. Okay. Uh, they've promised to sack most of those 7,000 people. Doge. CIA would be very similar. The caliber of analysts has been falling rapidly because they've been getting people from degrees that are mostly irrelevant. You then, when you have to start doing compliances and shit like that and social training and things, you are not focusing on what you're meant to be doing. You're focusing on all kinds of other shits. There's all kind of new compliances and rules that they've brought in, which don't work. It's expanded massively. All fake work that nobody wants. So they are so heavy and lumbering. They will never be able to carry out the kind of systemic, multi-year operation that got handed down from prime minister to prime minister to prime minister, which can be done in Israel but cannot be done in America anymore. Had you asked me this 20 years back, I would have said, yeah, this AI will carry it out.
So is this the reason behind this, the political polarization of the United States of America, while in Israel, despite the political differences when it comes to national security, they have a very consistent policy. In fact, something like this, Abhijit, would apply to India also, because if the deep state as a concept is feasible, then it exists everywhere. And then in even in a country like India, without divulging any details, which both of us have heard about so many times through newspaper reports, but even in India, then it is the same problem like in America. Government changes, idea changes.
Yes. It's worse in India because there is no handover. There is no transition period. So, for example, every new IB chief, every new RAW chief completely changes policy. Clearest example was the Baloch insurgency which Chidambaram started.
Yeah, this
Chidambaram's
was mentioned in the newspapers also.
uh, when it first came, see, when Chidambaram was given after this thing happened, what's it, 26/11, uh, Chidambaram said, look, let's not do something conventionally because there was heavy pressure on India not to retaliate conventionally. He said, let me start up an insurgency. And the thing that was told to him, all the members of the Congress, to their credit, and the Congress has used to have a very robust exchange mechanism. They said, listen, bro, which party is this? You're not in the BJP. We've lost two prime ministers to us starting up insurgencies. We started up the Punjab insurgency. We propped up Bindranwale to weaken the bloody Akali Dal. And we started up the Sri Lankan insurgency. The mother fell to the Punjab insurgency. The son fell to the Tamil Nadu, to the Sri Lanka insurgency. Okay. So he said, let me do it a new way. And his thing was, I am going to ply the Baloch with as much money, nothing other than money. We will introduce you to sources where you can buy arms. Even if 90% of the money is pilfered, even if 10% of the money is put to good use, that's a very good thing. And he ran a bloody amazing insurgency that had zero blowback on India. One of the reasons I don't criticize Chidambaram is people don't realize he was a security genius. He knew how to insulate India from consequences, starting an insurgency abroad, which is almost impossible. He did it. He did it. And the Balos insurgency, people have forgotten, bro. The Pakistan army lost huge tracts of land. They were using F-16s to bomb villages and shit like that. It was a civil war going on out there. Now, you'd expect a professional like Doval to understand that. The first thing he did when he came to office was within 1 month, he cut off all the funds. And that was the end of the Baloch insurgency. Okay. Now, what is the difference between Israel and America? Now, this is lack of handover and egos. In Israel, it's heavily polarized. They're vicious against each other. But when it comes to national security, there's a fundamental principle: when Israel calls, politics goes out of the window. Number one. Number two, even the left there is in no doubt that Hamas and Hezbollah are terrorists. They are not in doubt about the Palestinians at all. They harbor absolutely no, left or right, any misguided notions. Okay. And it's paying rewards. You look at 25% of Israel is Arab. Ever since this Gaza war started, have you seen a single Israeli Arab protest? They're all keeping absolutely quiet. And they're
Yeah,
like,
I can't recall one.
yeah, they're not. Whereas 2-3 years prior, there was major Arab rioting because Al-Aqsa mein something happened or the other. Okay. But this time there's absolutely zero sympathy for the Palestinians amongst the Israeli Arab Muslims. Okay. So this is a cultural difference out there. In security, they fight like dogs internally. I've literally seen conferences where a junior officer will, in front of foreigners, completely contradict his commanding officer. And they're vicious. They don't pull their punches. But they will go out and have a drink together after that. Not on politics. On politics, they will spit on each other and they won't go out and have a drink after that. And there is a rule out there: if the prime minister approves something, it is his pet project. There is a bunch of pet projects that are handed over from PM to PM that no PM will ever overrule after that. It is deemed, it is a tradition. So Golda Meir started that entire operation that started killing off the Munich, this thing. It was handed over right till Yitzhak Rabin, who finally paused it. He didn't stop it. He paused it for the Oslo peace process. And then it started off again when that went south. It has not ended. Even 4 or 5 years back, maybe 7 years back, if you remember, Israeli agents went to Dubai and killed off Hamas leaders and things like that in a hotel in Dubai, right? They've never stopped that. America is different. There is handover, but the politics is so vicious, and because they're a superpower, they don't face this sort of existential threat or whatever. They behave like they do in India, as if no handover has happened. So, for example, when the Obama team handed over to Trump, they removed certain alphabets on every single keyboard in the White House just to spite people.
Huh?
Yeah.
That's so stupid.
Yeah, but it's become like that.
Okay,
So
I
there
don't
is a
think
way
even
of
Indians will do something as stupid as that.
Israel, at least as far as security goes, has overcome that hyperpolarization. There will still be differences. So, for example, Yoav Gallant, who was the recently sacked defense minister, had very different ideas on how to proceed in the war. And Bibi has very different ideas of how to proceed with the war. But they all agree what needs to be done. They agree that Iran needs to be destroyed. They all agreed that Syria needed to remain divided. The Israelis, all of them, left and right, are very upset with what has just happened in Syria, by the way.
Do you think it helps when the enemy is well defined for a
Yes.
civilization?
Yes.
And that's why the American deep state becomes less efficient while the Israeli deep state becomes more efficient, because their enemy is very well defined. But yaar, फिर then why
Even
are
though
we so
bad-
hopeless? हमारा तो enemy defined है.
Huh? No way.
India क्यों hopeless है?
No, so you remember there was this book launch or whatever that happened this week where Jaishankar was asked by Swasti Rao, why don't you have a national security doctrine? And he said, we've never felt the need for having a national security doctrine. I remember at ORF, we were hosting sessions to write a national security doctrine. We were doing government consultations and things. And I remember a former NSA comes and says, we're not a literal civilization. The Vedas was passed down for 3,500 years orally. We just know the ideas to pass down. We don't need to write it down in a document. I know Indian diplomats abroad who have called Modi a fascist and things like that to foreign colleagues. And they became viral also because they gave a strong speech in the UN against Pakistan. Now, understand how much you dilute it. You want to define yourself as a civilizational state, but a lot of your people, especially your bureaucrats, don't believe in that civilizational definition.
They
Because
don't.
your entire UPSC syllabus is what this guy, what was his name? What was it? Dhar or Haksar, I forget which one of Indira Gandhi's secretaries it was, wanted a committed bureaucracy, and essentially the UPSC syllabus was the Congress Party manifesto. So they'll talk about Pakistan, but then the threat posed by Indian Muslims who see themselves as proximate to Pakistan will never be discussed. Bangladesh again. Yeah, Bangladeshi Muslims, they're not really Bangladeshi, they're Indian Muslims. Where is their coordination out there, bro? I've seen this myself with my community, the dual loyalties of my community in Sri Lanka. It took Rajiv Gandhi's assassination to change that. And now it's come back again. So, Tamil Nadu's a very funny state. As long as, the IPKF were getting killed, I know most people were very happy IPKF was getting killed. In Tamil Nadu, Indian Tamils who were happy that IPKF was getting killed by the LTTE. But Rajiv Gandhi is killed and they're like, oh shit, that shouldn't have happened. And this happened, by the way, in 62 also. That time, Tamil Nadu for a separate country was a huge thing. The moment we lost the war in 1962, all the Tamils shut up. No, we want to be part of India. We don't want to be a separate state. So, Tamil Nadu is one of those rare cases when we suffer an extreme trauma, they give up all their tamasha. Okay, but the rest of the country is not like that. But I've seen this dual loyalty play out with the Tamil community. Several Tamil communities, in fact. We don't define it at all. So where are you going to go?
But do you think, as far as the deep state at a conceptual level is concerned, every country should aspire to have a deep state?
No. Notice I never use the word deep state for Israel because it's institutional handover.
It's a security state. It's not a deep state.
It's not. Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's it's a security obsessed state. Call it that way. But there are certain conventions there which are sacred. Prime Minister to Prime Minister handover, the pet projects as they're called, are never violated. America, how can you call it a deep state if things shift so much? India is both unprofessional and no deep state. And you shouldn't have a deep state in a country, because in a poor country like India, when you have a deep state, it entrenches all the bad behavior that has led you to being poor. I am not a fan of a deep state in any country. I am a much bigger fan of the Israeli handover system. If you want to get into Israel problems, Israel is a very fucked up state that way. Every country is fucked up in its own way. Okay. Israel has its own level of fuck ups. But that is one system which incidentally happens in India on all things nuclear. So on nuclear, No prime minister has broken from the handover that happens from prime minister to prime minister. What every prime minister has prioritized, Modi prioritized everything in nuclear that Manmohan Singh prioritized. Manmohan Singh prioritized everything. And to his credit, even IK Gujral did not break that convention. But when it comes to intelligence, 3 prime ministers have broken the convention. First, Morarji Desai weakened our intel. Then IK Gujral weakened our intel. Then Narendra Modi weakened our intel. Okay, you can't give up intel assets like that. You can't just start up an insurgency and say, "Ab tu ja, tu apne pe." Because tomorrow, if you want to start up a Khyber Pakhtunkhwa insurgency, they'll say, "Yeah, bro, we know exactly what you did to the Baloch. Sorry, we're not falling for you." Then you lose control. Okay, so how is it we're able to do it on nuclear? In fact, the way our nuclear program has advanced, there has been no dilution of objectives. There has been no dilution of the technological requirements. There's been no dilution of the doctrine. And we've been progressing. We knew what path India was going to take 20 years back. We know it even today. Narasimha Rao set it in motion. He did not carry out the tests. Vajpayee carried out the tests when he could. But Vajpayee incidentally didn't break convention. He just broke the rule on testing. But even that was something Narasimha Rao was ready to carry out. The Americans detected it on satellite and they said, "Oh, we'll sanction you." And remember, we were much weaker under Narasimha Rao than we were under Vajpayee. Vajpayee was stronger. And we had learned because they provided us with the data saying, "Look, we know you're preparing a nuclear test." So we knew their satellites, we could calculate the satellite time and we fooled them. So the Americans didn't know we were testing. Maybe we shouldn't have gone public and announced it, maybe. But that was a different calculus. What has since happened is all followed a planned trajectory handed over from PM to PM to PM to PM, and the convention has not been broken. Now, why can't we do this for economics? Why can't we do this for the military? I think Modi has started that with the military now. I don't know if it will work or not because I don't have very high confidence in the people he's chosen to do it with the military. There's uh, why can't we do it with Intel? Modi himself is responsible for one of the biggest blunders, which was giving up the Baloch insurgency. It should have never been done. Even what little terrorism you now have in Kashmir would have evaporated much quicker had that been done. Right, but we didn't. We let our assets out to dry and out to dry.
What do you make of the entire BJP accusation of the Americans? How do we read that? Because see, this whole discussion at a theoretical level, honestly, you got triggered because of this. I'm talking about this freaking thread that BJP did. I'm not going to show the entire thread. I just showed what the for people are there. So 5th of December, go and check the thread out. The handle is at BJP for India. So it's, I think, the digit 4 India or something of that sort. That's the handle. Now, what do you make of BJP's allegations? How do we take it? Like, are they trying to send a message to the American deep state that we are on to you? So I want to spend the next 20 minutes doing that, and then we'll take a few random questions and wrap up.
Sure. Now, it was very successful, that thread, because the State Department keeps saying that USCIRF, US Council on International Religious Freedoms and all of that, do not represent America. Okay, these are individual agencies giving their opinion. Then we show them, thanks to this media part, that America is the State Department and USAID are funding all the things who are directly attacking India. Now we say this guy, who's the officer who got caught in this Nikhil Gupta Gurpatwant Pannu thing.
Vikas Yadav, na?
Vikas Yadav, we say that this is a rogue officer. Rogue officer sanctioned a rogue operation. They say no. Then we show them this and say, so you're sanctioning all that tax on us, right? They can't say no, which is why they never, State Department did not react. USA did not react. And they can no longer say that, oh, this is USCIRF, it's different. In fact, nobody at the embassy came out and put out a statement. They had a cut, copy, paste statement when Suhasini and Siddhant emailed them. Both were given the exact same cut, copy, paste statement. They refused to come on the record. And notice, nobody at the White House press briefing asked, either at the State Department weekly briefing, daily briefing, or the White House daily briefing, was that question even asked. You know why? Because the White House Correspondents Association runs like a mafia.
Yeah,
They
question
decide who's,
plant hote hain.
yeah. And nothing was asked to the Americans. That was such a major accusation coming from the official handle of the ruling party against two departments of the American government. Nothing was asked to them, which is very revealing, no? I mean, you talk about press freedom, but the press hears of a major allegation against the US State Department and doesn't dare to ask you a question. You would think that that Bangladeshi bastard who sits out there and asks all pro-Pakistan questions would have seen it as an opportunity to drive a wedge and raise the question. Even he didn't open his mouth. Why?
Yeah, I guess
So you
this is.
put them on the back foot. They now know that they can't get away with this shit. It's going to be monitored.
Hmm.
And it's not going to be taken very kindly. And in fact, I suspect this is going to be brought up with Trump. And the State Department realizes it's going to be brought up with Trump. And all this expanded bureaucracy is shitting its pants if it's brought up with Trump. Why do you think it was sometime after that, I think a day or two after that, that both Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy tweeted, American taxpayer money needs to be used for taxpayers, not going to NGOs.
Yeah, that Pakistani thingy controlling the hotel. And
Hotel.
today, I don't know if you saw that statement from the Americans about the Pakistani missile program or something.
Yeah,
We're
that
going
was
to
at the
put
Carnegie
sanctions.
Endowment Nuclear Conference. But yeah, why do you think they've suddenly changed stance on all of this? See, the problem was we weren't hitting back at all. The moment you hit back, see the kind of changes it produces.
Hmm.
See, bullies need to be bullied back. They need to be called out on every single thing. And no, you don't get to justify it as media freedom.
So, do you think that also has worked in the Canadian case? Because the moment we release the name of the border security guy, like my assumption was when I was looking at all of that, right? My first assumption was that definitely the Indian government has 20 more names that they have kept in their hand. They just released one. They're like, देखो हमको ये पता है ये तुम्हारा border security agent है, and then they had to do this whole CBC defense piece. Like, I was like, what, Indian government will start giving random names? See, it's a very given thing that governments snoop on each other. Like,
Yes,
obviously, even the Canadians snoop on Indians in
of
India.
course.
Everybody's snooping on everyone.
Mm.
So it is only these selective leaps happened. So as far as India and America is concerned, I want to add one more question because Rahul Gandhi was mentioned in this entire thing. Do you
Mm.
think Rahul Gandhi's statement when he was in America, do you remember his statement when he picked out the Sikh gentleman, poor guy, he had to come on TV, the journalist, he was a journalist and he was not even allowed to question. And then later on, one more journalist was physically manhandled. Now, do you think this is also part of the coordinated deep state thing? Because everybody makes nowadays, everything is deep state then.
Okay, so let's stop using deep state. I told you that
Yeah,
definition.
it just dilutes everything. That's what
It
exactly
dilutes
I'm
everything,
saying.
right? So what happens is, um, Rahul needs foreign validation. He doesn't value Indian opinion because he doesn't listen to any of his own advisors. All his advisors say that he's a loose cannon. He takes his own decisions, and the only thing that works with him is chaplacy. Which is why you've seen Sanjay Jha is going overtime to, even though he got kicked out for raising a voice, he's going overtime to justify Rahul won't hurt a fly. भाई चिकन खाता है ना, तो चिकन तो मार रहा है साला, तो बट फ्लाई नहीं, हाँ मक्खी तो मैं भी नहीं खाता हूँ. I'm not agile enough to have ever killed a fly. Uh, so what ends up happening is with Rahul, and you can see it, he comes to the Indian Parliament, to the center of our democracy, wearing a t-shirt. But he addresses low-grade students at even a third-rate UK or US university. He wears a full-on suit, boot, tie, and all of that. He doesn't respect Indian opinions. Now, there was apparently a delegation, I know the names of these people, who came down and told him before the last election, polarize, polarize, polarize. He listens. When white people tell him certain things, he listens. Okay. He listens to them. And he's too stupid to have an opinion that he's crafted by himself. He's very susceptible to suggestion, but suggestion by white people. He considers them to be, I guess, more, I can't say this for sure. I mean, I don't know what his thinking is, but I guess just more professional. You know, I'll tell you why I think this is an accurate guess, because I used to be like that about 10, 12 years back. Because, you know, every time you go to DC or London, the kind of, in a round table, the kind of expertise you would see that got marshaled, people who would know extraordinary minutiae of nuclear programs, people who, when they were talking about the Zaire civil war, had been there on the front line, seen it from all sides, because they fund primary research and things. You get overwhelmed and carried away. And, you know, when I came back, for 2-3 years, I was like, yeah, this is like serious professional. Indians are bloody third world chimpanzees, white people, America, Britain, all, they know exactly what they're doing. It's so professional and methodical. But even methodically, you can be a monkey. Because I was seeing these people I really respected on nuclear getting it horribly wrong with the Indian nuclear program. They would assume, for example, that an anti-ballistic missile program was proof that India was moving to first strike. So we have a second strike. We will not use nuclear weapons first. We will absorb the first hit of nuclear weapons, but then we will destroy you with our nuclear weapons completely. We believe in massive retaliation. If you launch one, we will not launch one. We will launch 100. Okay. And they believed that when you get in a ballistic missile defense, you're doing it so that you will first hit. This is the general notion of an anti-ballistic missile defense, that you will first obliterate the enemy, and then your ballistic missile defense will be, because, you know, ballistic missile defense is an incredibly difficult thing. It's like, remember when the first drone attacks happened on Israel, almost all the drones were intercepted. But when the second round, while all the drones were intercepted, the ballistic missiles had a very high success rate. Right? Almost all the ballistic missiles, there were only about 10 ballistic missiles used, but 7 of them fell, and the Israelis were not able to intercept them. Ballistic missiles are horribly difficult to intercept. So then the enemy will have fewer ballistic missiles left, and that is what a ballistic missile defense comes into. So it shows you're going in. By in India, you know, being an Indian, that bureaucrats run everything. Some jackass comes up with a program. He says, I want funding for it. They said, technology hai chalega. I know that is how we know this is how the Indian anti-ballistic missile program came about. It was entirely a territory building exercise within the DRDO. Several notes had come out pointing out that it's technologically not feasible, especially given the on one hand, the short flight times from Pakistan to India, so almost no warning. And on the second, the very, very long flight times from China to India, relatively. I mean, a ballistic missile from China to India will take about 12 minutes, uh, which is very short, but whatever. But it'll be flying at such high speeds, 17,500 kilometers per hour. You can't do anything about it. It had been pointed out several times. Maybe sometime we should do a podcast on why ballistic missile defense is so expensive and pointless.
Let's do it next week in person. तू
No,
आ
no,
रहा ही
no.
तो
That
है.
requires a lot of graphs and shit. It's so will take about 2 hours. It's a very complex
अबे
thing.
साले इन पर्सन इजी होएगा मेरे लैपटॉप पे, इसीलिए बोल रहा हूँ.
देखते हैं. So, and these are people I really respected, making complete fools of themselves. They've been in India. They've lived in India. They've lived in India for years. They know the same people I know. So they're either being deliberately deceitful, or they've forgotten, or they're running an agenda, or they didn't absorb anything. So you could have got a great deal of minutia and effort and primary research and still have gotten nothing out of it. I'll give you an example with me. This has happened to me also. Afghanistan, when I went there, it changed my entire perspective. You remember I've been saying since that time that the Taliban are not anti-India. And they're proving it every day because they've completely turned on Pakistan and they're killing more Pakistanis than we've ever managed to. What I got wrong was that I believed the Afghan army would not fall. When I go back and look at what happened, of course, there was the deal that happened in Qatar. But other than that, I was only exposed. My visits to the Taliban were not curated. I could go meet them. My visits to army bases were completely curated. I was only shown what they wanted me to see. But because I went through friends, I assumed I was getting to see everything, which was clearly not the case. My parallax error. I admit it. Okay. But these guys, they have no introspection. I mean, zero. They'll argue till, we've actually, me, Angad, and a few other friends, we've actually sat down and laughed at them while they're saying, we're guffawing deliberately to insult these people at conferences. And we go on telling them, bro, you're the ones that keep complaining to us about how fucking asinine our bureaucracy is. How are you not understanding that this is territory building and just wasting money and creating new programs for the sake of nothing, which have absolutely zero technical outcomes? It could be agenda, of course. Maybe they know and they want to pretend that they don't know because it extends their shelf life. But it is what it is.
चल अभी थोड़े क्वेश्चंस लेते हैं and then we'll wrap it up. I'm not going to take all of them because the random question पूछो, subject का पूछो. So
Just open the chat to me. I'll also see some interesting questions that come up.
Okay, रुक जा, मैं chat खोल रहा हूँ. But मैं तो super chat questions ढूंढ रहा हूँ ना. Okay,
20
Abhijit, what's stopping government of India to go after Gandhi's? Why does government of India need US approval? It is related to this issue. I don't
It
think.
is related. I'll tell you why. First, Amit Shah has taken this entire Ambedkar thing very, very personally. So you're going to see FIRs against Rahul and things like that. They'll go after all these people after the 20th because they know if they do it before Biden, State Department, all that nonsense, after January 20th, expect some serious shit to happen.
Hmm. Don't converging interests eventually result in active coordination, which is what the deep state is?
No. Deep state is a unified command with a unified vision. Converging interests don't always converge. The way I explained it to you, for example, DEI was convergent up to a point till it overreached and harmed the entire expansion of services with this
Okay.
election, for example. So but they do. There's herd mentality, pack behavior. Understand, packs and deep state, which is unified command, are very different. Allies are not the same country. Okay, so for example, Germany, Italy, Japan are all allies, but they're not one country.
Yeah. This is so funny. Is our good for nothing Babudam a deep state equivalent?
I know they'd like to think of themselves as that, but they're not.
Oh my god. Okay, so I'll change this question. Can a coup be arranged against the Indian government? I think Indians need to have a little more faith in Indian democracy. We're not Bangladesh, bhai. Thoda to sharam karo yaar. Itne bhi gande nahi hai hum.
There are certain things you can't go past. No government, even the Congress in its current state, well, I don't know about Rahul Gandhi, but yeah, will go past that. But you see a lot of instances of bureaucrats, I know for a fact, who have deliberately torpedoed, scuttled, or embarrassed the government.
Okay, yeah, acha question hai. Isn't the deep state a structure outside the government that acts outside the principle of by, for, or of the people? If this is the case, isn't America really a rogue state operating outside its people's wishes?
No, not necessarily. A deep state is elements within the government, in fact, not outside the government, um, that have a revolving door policy, both in and out, but a large part of it is, in fact, very much within the government. And they come about to insulate policy from popular politics. That is the whole point of a deep state, which is why the Pakistani military, which is why the Egyptian military, which is why the Thai monarchy military combine are deep states.
Hmm. Okay, you should be able to answer this. Wouldn't you say it was a perfect deep state handover till Bush and Obama, but Trump broke it, and what we are seeing is a deep state blowback?
It is. It is. And you know why? Uh, Bush and Obama would very frequently recycle the same people. There was general bipartisan agreement in both those things. But you know what? It started breaking down under Obama because Obama was such a toxic little piece of shit that the Republican consensus started breaking, which is why Trump got elected in the primaries in the first place. Had he not, had Obama not fractured American society as much as he did, because all this DEI, gender nonsense, it all started under Obama. Don't forget that. That is the whole reason that Trump won the Republican primaries because the uni party, that's a better term. In America, let's use the term uni party, wherein it was the center and center right, center left, which were more or less aligned on all things. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, for example, Bush wanted to pursue an isolationist policy when he first came. Son Bush, not Daddy Bush. He became the most globally engaged. He engaged in more regime change shit than any previous president had, just like Bill Clinton, in fact. So he contradicted his own statements and regime changed countries, like Clinton had tried to with Yugoslavia and things like that, right? So Obama is the one that broke the consensus. Trump is the symptom of it. Trump, one, tried to maintain the consensus, but they went on attacking him. And now he's decided the best thing to do is to break the consensus because he doesn't believe the consensus exists with the will of the people.
Can the deep state
You're
use
right in that way.
silos?
You're right in that way, but it was Obama that broke it technically. He pushed it, same as DEI. They pushed too far, blowback.
Can the apparent deep state also use businessmen like Soros? They can. Okay.
Okay, so let's understand what Soros's motivations are. He loves market distortions because he thrives in market distortions. He can bring down companies and sectors that have market distortions and profits off them. What is DEI? It's essentially distorting the market, removing from profitability and focusing on things that are not profitable. Classic case is Disney. They've had all their privileges removed by the Florida government. They've lost their tax-free status. They've lost their own mini independent state status and things like that. Their films are all bombing at the box office. Their TV programs are not doing well. They're in deep loss and they're doubling down on DEI. This is a market distortion. When it collapses, this man, Soros, will make a lot of money out of it. He tries to, now that, of course, one is service expansion. Soros comes at it from a completely different angle, which is it is a market distortion. Market distortion is good for me, so I should distort more markets. He wants to generate socialist market distortions so that when they crash, he makes money when markets crash. That's how it works. To
Yeah.
understand, the DEI instructor has a different agenda. The universities that are making billions out of DEI training have a different agenda. BlackRock has a different agenda because they want to monetize DEI. Soros has a different agenda that he wants DEI to destroy markets so that he can profit. Very contradictory to each other. Yet they will act in a concerted way because they all want to push DEI for their own benefit. Harvard because it wants to profit from it. BlackRock because it also wants to profit from it. But George Soros, because he wants it to destroy the system, create a market crash from which he can profit.
Yeah. Just one last question before we wrap up. Was the National Advisory Council installed during the UPA and Indian deep state? How?
It was an extra constitutional supra cabinet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like one last, I wanted to keep this till the end. Everybody is obsessed with Americans. If you read enough books, why isn't anybody talking about the Russians or the Chinese influence in India? The Chinese deep state or the Russian deep state in India? Why aren't they deep state or only Americans are deep state?
The Chinese deep state is a very weird thing. It is not a deep state because every time they form a power clique, Chinese politics is so vicious they get destroyed. Remember, even Mao Zedong at the peak of his power was removed from public power twice. And he had to concoct the Cultural Revolution and the, what was the other thing? The Cultural Revolution and the other purge, yeah.
Great leap forward.
Leap forward to come back to power. Since then, Deng Xiaoping created something like a deep state, which Xi Jinping came and broke in 20, 30 years. And he's created a different kind of a deep state, which he himself keeps purging every 3, 4 years. It doesn't matter how close you are to him. He's like Stalin that way. No matter how close you are, one day you'll get a knock from the secret police and you'll be removed and killed. So there is no Chinese deep state that way. Russia, again, it's a one-man deep state, which is not a deep state. So none of these actually form the definition. If Russia had a deep state, if the USSR had a deep state, how could Stalin go around massacring so many people? Stalin killed more Russians than the German army did, by the way. And have Khrushchev come and overturn everything. And then Brezhnev come and overturn everything Khrushchev did. And then finally, Gorbachev, because there was a rapid succession of leaders who died. So Gorbachev was the next big leader. Come and destroy even everything that Brezhnev, Khrushchev, and Stalin did and destroy the USSR. Then you have Boris Yeltsin, who destroys what is left of Russia. Then Putin comes and builds up Russia, but Medvedev cedes ground, and then Putin comes back and holds fort. That's not a deep state. And that is why China is also not a deep state. And their influence in India is very crude. Russia thrives on public adulation and nostalgia. China thrives on bribery and ideological. Otherwise, they're not able to do much in India.
So what I'm understanding is, as far as the Anglo-Saxon Empire is concerned, they just have the economic resources and the intellectual resources to think far more long term compared to other empires, and that is probably the reason they're able to execute.
So let me explain this. America's always been able to do this. People don't realize this is, when some very stupid things that Elon Musk and co say, that Tucker Carlson also the same. The British were such a decent empire. They were not really. Why? Because they did mercantilism. Mercantilism is you have to maintain your industry. So your colonies should not industrialize and they should perpetually be buying your products. The problem is they get impoverished to the point they can no longer buy your products. As opposed to American capitalism, which is very different from British mercantilism, which is that everybody gets rich, markets expand, and so we can go higher and higher up the value chain. We push the lower end to these new allies of ours. And as markets keep extending, there is infinite expansion of the market, and we can just keep going up and up and up and up. So America invented that. Then they invent NGOs and think tanks and things like that, which when you're moving from manufacturing to services, generate a whole load of compliances and ethics. And are you ethically sourcing your rubber? Are you doing ethical effluent discharge? Is it environmentally? So they generate all this. Well, some of it is not bogus. I think effluents, we can all agree some of the environmental norms are good things, but DEI is not. Okay. And environmental activism can also be taken to extremes like that dumb mutt, Greta Thunberg, and things like that. So there's an inherently good idea at it, and using NGOs and think tanks, they perpetuate. So very simple. Today, if you go, first of all, why are there not too many American companies in Africa? Think about it. Okay. Because the profit margins are razor thin. No American company wants to operate out there. The moment you show there's a huge market gap and massive profits to be made, the Americans will kick you out of that market. Okay. But when you go there, it becomes a trap. Because if you want to enter the American market, supply the American market, raise funds in the American market, you have to comply with their ethics, their regulations, their corruption. And in Africa, you can't get anything done without corruption. So you fall foul of their laws. How do you avoid it? You have to hire lobbyists in America. You have to hire lawyers in America. You have to lobby senators and things. See, expanding of services. They're providing you with services so that you comply. They're using their market size to force you to buy compliance services for America, do government relations through think tanks, do compliances and lobbying through NGOs. There's a difference between lobbying and NGO, but there is an overlap. And you have to buy American services. You'll probably have to get American experts into your organization, which then adds to American intelligence coverage, because most of these people are somehow linked to the intel community in one way or another. And they get their hand in every pie. Even when they're not in the market through American compliance, they are in the market. And if you want to enter the American market, you're forced to comply with American rules and regulations. So America has created a complete web and net. So, America, the decline of American power, unlike Britain went like this. USSR went like this. China like this. America will go like this. It will be a very long, slow decline at that. I actually thought, Kushal, you remember 2, 3 years back when we did a similar podcast, I told you this is the end of America, that the institutions are so horribly corrupted,
Hmm.
they are so horribly infiltrated that America will not be able to repair itself. And yet, in this election, we have seen the American ability to repair itself. For most part, these guys seem to have identified the problem very, very well, and they're going to attack the problem. Now, will they succeed? Different matter. But America is able to analyze its own problems very well. In fact, the most informed critique of America will come from America. It will not come from outside America.
Fair enough.
Yeah, there is no informed critique outside or inside.
Yeah, India, mein, I think it's a mixed bag of. I think India is just lucky. I don't know what else am I supposed
यार
to say
हम
about
हम
India.
राम भरोसे रहते हैं.
Yeah, in
It's just
no, and honestly, there are some people who are really dedicated and love the country. I
yeah.
honestly, I like. I'm talking about like we've met enough people in our life and read
Mhm.
enough in our life through books and newspapers that we're just lucky that decade after a decade,
So many
people are
people love this
dedicated.
country in spite of being let down so badly by this country. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just India is so lucky it has so many people. Chalo, but we'll wrap it up. But I actually like the idea of you trying to do that ballistic missile thing. To aaja
Very,
wapis,
very
we'll
good.
figure out. Yeah,
We'll figure
we'll
it out.
figure out what we do.
ठीक है.
So, anyways, guys, we'll wrap it up. So go follow Abhijit on X, and if you like what we've done today, try to support the Cārvāka podcast membership program. You know the rest of the drill. Like, subscribe, jo bhi hai karna hai karo. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, good night. Take care. Bye